Welcome back to Griffiths Grounds, where we connect people from industry, academia, and government that are tech experts in their field to you. Thank you for joining us today, and to my lovely guest, Karen Roth, Deputy Director of AFWERX, who is part of the innovation arm of the AFWERX. You're also a passionate supporter of women in STEM careers and serve on the Society of Women Engineers and supported a beautiful, inspiring conference back in October of 2024. We'll get into more details onto that, but can you give us and the audience a little bit of a background? What inspired you to get to where you are today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on Griffiths Grounds. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. Um, it's a little bit of everything of what life looks like. I mean, back in high school, I'm not even sure I really understood what an engineer was or what it was meant to be. All I knew that engineers got to design stuff, and I thought that sounded like fun. I was looking at doing like computer science or something like that, but it was really the development of ideas and products that was more motivational to me. And so I hunted around. Someone told me that software engineering was like a thing of the future, and maybe that's really what I wanted to be in. And did some research and kind of ended up at Rochester Institute of Technology because they were one of the only people that had a software engineering degree as an undergrad at the time. And it was really, great in terms of like that really was the right environment for me where I could nurture not only that computing and intellectual background, but also really what does being an engineer really mean? How do you use your skills, all of your skills, your personal skills, your requirements analysis, financial background, understanding of a little bit of everything about how the world works in order to build viable products. And so that's what I really loved about being an engineer was taking and learning a little bit about everything. And I was interviewing, looking for jobs. I actually went to a suite conference and was talking to everyone. I had done a lot of co-ops and internships, but nothing had really been clicking for me. And so I up to the Air Force Research Laboratories. And I had a conversation from him from the information directorate. And he said he worked in Rome. And I said, "Where's Rome?" And the thing that struck me at the time of talking to him and then doing the follow-up interviews was how much everyone cared and was interested in their jobs and was passionate about the work that they did, and also just about how government work really is very systematic from the perspective of you get to see a little bit of everything. You get to lead a lot more strategy than you might in a very specific organization or company. And at the time I remember thinking, well, I can always do this for a couple of years and then move on. So here I am almost 20 years later.
Just a couple years.
Yeah, just a couple years. Um, and so I had some great initial projects as a startup where I got to learn a lot of things. I did actually, Dr. Tim Bush, who a lot of folks in the area know because he worked at the lab, but also was a professor at SUNY Poly for a long time as well. He was actually my first tech advisor and mentor at the lab. And so he tried to convince me that I also wanted a PhD. Of what I learned from him is that I really don't want a PhD. And so I think that that was really great because like he taught me about all of like how to deeply do research and things like that. And what I learned is I really, really should want to be an engineer. And so I got a Master of Engineering from Cornell as like one of the first online degrees, like fully online degrees. And then actually move branches to move further away from research and more into implementation of all those great ideas. I did that for a little bit. I worked in space for a little bit. I moved over to cyber for a little bit because that's what I love about engineering is doing a little bit of everything, learning about a little about everything in order to do that. And then I left the government for a while. Decided I wanted to work on bigger projects, try new things. I worked at Sikorsky Aircraft. I worked at Booz Allen Hamilton. Um, I never saw myself coming back to a research lab because I wanted to build products. And then someone from my old life that knew I was coming back to live in the area because personally we really wanted to come back and live here. I had married my husband while I was gone. We had talked about what family meant, and we spent more time driving back to New York to visit family and friends than we did in Connecticut where we were living. So we're like, well, this is silly. We're just going to go live in New York again. But I didn't come back and work at the lab. I just came back to live here. This is where we wanted to live. And someone from my old life said, you know, the chief engineer position's opening, right? I said, yes. And he said, well, you know, you're going to apply for that, right? I said, no, I don't have enough experience for what you're looking for that job. Um, that doesn't make any sense. And he's like, yes, you do. And so I think that was really serendipitous from like the perspective of like having the impact I had while I was there, and people remembering the impact and the conversation that I had, to being able to say, all right, well, that's what I need to say. Like, someone thinks that I am the right person for this position to be able to apply and come back to the lab. Because remember thinking then, well, I'm like, well, that was the one position I would definitely want if I was coming back to the research lab is chief engineer. How do we make sure that the things that we're working on are going to come out and be impactful and usable and all that? And so applied for the job, got the job, and really love being able to do a little bit of everything in the community, get more ingrained in the community, working a lot on the conversation and the start of Innovating and what it all meant as part of that. But I sat in that job for 5 years. I started to get a little itchy because I'm an engineer, right? I want to learn new things. I want to do new things. And it was another serendipitous, again, like some other folks that I had worked with and other directorates in AFRL said, hey, like literally it was a type, this position's opening, right? And you said you think it's almost time, like this is where you want to be next. And something clicked and I said, oh yes, this is where I want to be next. And so it worked out that this was another case of best candidate, best job. But this particular job, so for those that don't know, AFWERX is also another directorate within AFRL. So we're actually RG. And so it's still getting to work with Air Force Research Laboratory, but really more deeply working with small businesses, finding all the tech innovation that exists out in the ecosystem. More importantly, finding the right technology innovation for us, for the military, for the Air Force use. There's tons of innovation out there in small businesses. Not all of it is going to be the tech that we need in terms of security capability, usability, even just business model. Like there's a lot of tech that really want to sell in a certain way that from an acquisition standpoint and how we acquire it is never going to make sense for us as the Air Force. So how do you sort through all of those factors and kind of start to piece together that technology of like, all right, this, and this, then that starts to become an impactful product of that future. So it's still using that systems engineering mindset of mine because I have an MBA too. I got that somewhere along the way. Picked it up for entertainment. I love learning. And so that's kind of where we landed on today and AFWERX is a fully remote organization. So I can still live and work here in Rome, and I have employees across 28 states right now of being able to hit all these different innovation ecosystems and keep a lookout for what's going on and making sure that we're always in the right place in the right time.
I love that. You have a vast span of your career. Any one moment out of that is like a key highlight milestone for you that you found inspiration from?
I really love, from a career standpoint, being able to work on Innovari with Griffiths Institute and all that. And I mean, I know this sounds like, okay, well, the thing that I'm working on with you right now, sitting in the building, but I thought that this, like the building of the building of the Innovari concept and how we were pulling in all the community elements and being able to step outside of the laboratory in a different way, talk to businesses in a different way about the value proposition of government work, what the Air Force needs, and how to build that community coalition. Like the simple things like all right, I can use my government best capabilities in order to draw some of the best scientists and researchers in the world on the technology we have. I can't build apartments in order to make sure that they can actually come and have somewhere to live here. And so that community element to being able to build what the Griffiths Institute, the NFRA, and all the community members around here was really a defining moment for mine about how we can kind of cross those lines in terms of government versus industry versus community and really work together as a team with kind of all of our different superpowers together and bring that together and be very impactful doing that.
You were very pivotal in opening up the Innovating Advancement Centers, almost as if you and the rest of the Innovating Alliance members were kind of these trendsetters because you tapped into an area that was not being done. Nobody's done that before,
Mhm.
right? This open innovation environment that was ran by a PIA and managed by a PIA on behalf of the Information Directorate to be able to go ahead and collaborate with US and non US citizens on basic fundamental research, and then also have that environment that could host those basic fundamental conversations, right, that were unclassified. That was pivotal. And it kind of opened up a whole nother realm for us to explore and look into. Are there any other current industry trends that you see in the pipeline that you can talk about or that you kind of see happening for engineering or for AFWERX?
AFWERX owns the Silver Sitter portfolio for the Department of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So we own about that part of the portfolio of what we work on is about 1.4 billion for on behalf
1.4 billion.
yeah, on
Okay.
behalf of the Department of the Air Force, so both Air Force and Space Force. The things that I am most interested in, and so we see thousands of applications. Like every single one of our open topics has over 1,000 submissions come in every single time. We are so privileged to see the best of the best technical innovation across the country. I know it exists. I know that it's out there. I know people are excited about it. The things that interest me most, I mean, continuing to put on my systems engineering hat that I always be is, you can I consider all this technical innovation more as a tool. Like, how do I get to my end goal of developing the product? This is one of the tools. It's the people, and it's developing the cohort mentality of how to have businesses work together to achieve those higher aims. How do we work together as more community, as more systems to make sure it's, in engineering, we talk about there not being any silver bullet, right? There's no one perfect solution to anything. Our job is to understand the outside influences, understand the outside stakeholders, understand the impact and the goals we're going for, and put together the best solution possible in order to get there. It's going to be everything that's coming in from that portfolio is only ever going to be one piece of the solution, right? And so you're still going to have other government buy-in. You're still going to have people with purchasing capability. You have to have the technical capability to run and program manage it in order to get to the solution you're looking for. So how can we team together better cross service through Defense Innovation Unit, through Army Applications Lab, through Naval X, and take the best of the best and making sure that our data and integration is capable of rapidly finding what those solutions are, putting them together, and fielding them. That is the thing that I am most excited about on how we can cross those technical capabilities of being genuine systems engineers and finding the tech where it is and inspiring people to come together to be able to create those solutions.
Nice. Are there many challenges with that?
So there's a lot of technical challenges because especially if you're doing like a lot of software based types of things, how did people design their interfaces? How did people structure their data? In some cases, you might find something that's what looks like the perfect solution and component to a particular problem. But once you unpack it and look at the coding on the back end,
Mhm.
it actually may have to be completely rewritten from scratch. And so is that your perfect solution? If because if they did a lot of whoever designed the software did a lot of coding that specifically said, all right, I want you signal to send from here to here to here, and not I want you signal to go between this component and this component and this component, that's a very different software engineering technique. And I can then take in and out a component and interchange things, but I can't, I have to recode if you told it specifically to talk from one thing to one thing to one thing. And so that's where a software engineer or a systems engineer is critical to being able to deconstruct software to understand its viability for future integration and opportunity space.
It's a lot. Do you have getting to the point that you're at today from AFRL, AFWERX, were there personal challenges or struggles that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are?
I mean, I think everyone has those different types of things. I mean, my husband politely requested I stop pursuing degrees randomly for fun because it stresses me out. um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, we moved, we started a family. I do have that passion for supporting women in engineering, kind of on the side, as like I do all of my Society of Women Engineers work in my personal capacity. So that's all in my off time. I do have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And, you know, I think a lot about the conversation where we tell little girls that you can be anything you want to be. That's not entirely true. You have to pick the things that are of value to you and make sure you prioritize those things in life. So I prioritize, I wanted to come back to work after I had my girls. I love the challenge of engineering, and those kinds of things. So I had to find the balance of being able to find the right daycares, the right schools, the right everything to support that we knew that was viable. My husband travels a lot for work, but neither of us were both inspired and challenged by our work, and so we had to find a balance between. We always knew both of us were going to be working full time parents. So what does that mean? That means we got to make sure that we spend time with our girls whenever we're home. It means we focus on that. It means we say no to things and we have boundaries, and probably we should be getting babysitters more often than we are to taking a little bit break. But we knew that there was going to be hard challenges, but we also had to have the hard conversations of when we needed the support from each other and what was on the table and what wasn't. And that's a lot of those hard conversations. I mean, there's sometimes where, when I was interviewing for this current job, I didn't bring up the fact that I had kids or anything like that. I wanted to make sure that the job was right for my merits and I was a good fit for that. And then we could work the job around the rest of life, around that. And I think that's the amazing part of this job is a lot of the people I work with have kids too. So we just all kind of bounce back and forth between each other. And there's probably been opportunities where I walked away from too because they didn't necessarily fit. And I had to learn that. And I had to learn what my values really were and what was important to me, versus what life said an engineer should look like. Like it's okay to be excited about all this kind of work and maybe not do day-to-day coding and engineering. I will always be an engineer. It's just what I decide to engineer. Right now I'm enjoying engineering people systems versus physical systems. Does
Nice.
that make sense?
It makes total sense. You talk about your husband, and it sounds like you have a really great support system to there to understand that work-life balance and kind of knowing when to say no and setting boundaries. Is he who you look to for mentorship? Is that just an internal thing that you know and you embrace of keeping yourself focused? Or have you throughout your career learning, have you always had a mentor? How important is a mentor in your life?
Mentorship is important to get from a wide variety of different people and make sure that you have mentees as well, because your mentees are going to teach you lots of stuff too. Um, I mean, I like to take a wide swath of learning a little bit from everyone because, you're going to get mentorship and it's not going to be the right mentorship for you, though, sometimes too. So you need to be able to understand what those different balances are between that. So I think my husband's a great sounding board, but he's also not an engineer and he doesn't work in government. And so I have different kinds of challenges and philosophies and questions about stuff that he's not always the right person to go to. Um, he's good for a sounding board from a, I didn't think you wanted to go back to AFRL. Is this the right decision? Like, are you like excited by the prospect of the job? Have you thought through all the pros and cons about making sure that this is really the right move to go back when you specifically left it for a certain reason, which was to do more engineering work? Or do you think you're going to be able to do that if you take this chief engineer role? And so that's where he's a really good sounding board from that perspective. He's a lot more risk averse than I am too. I'm a fairly risk averse person as an engineer too. And he's like, I think I am.
Okay.
I think I am. Maybe it's all in my mind as I'm thinking through it, but I think I'm fairly risk averse. And so just making sure, because he's one of those types of people that is planning on working in the same place for like his whole career of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this well, I love doing this thing, and this is what I am going to do. So like even just the concept of like changing jobs around and things like that, he's like, okay. But that's where like the Society of Women Engineers provides a massive community of, it's 50,000 women, all with that engineering background perspective. And all of that has always provided a phenomenal mentorship capability for me, especially to see women doing other things at different times and why did you make this decision when and where and how, and being able to put all that together. I'm very input and data driven. I make decisions by taking in all of the input and data and kind of understanding that and then trying to put together a final perspective answer based on that.
It sounds like you have a good work-life balance between the work that you do at AFWERX and then the SWE aspect to be able to blend both of them and then be able to have a good life balance as well.
I wouldn't say it's perfect right now. I would say it's a little stressful
If it
right
was
now.
perfect, I'd have to have a whole nother podcast. Like, all right.
Right, like
I
what
want to do
answer
this,
have I
yeah.
figured out? I think it's good from the perspective of keeping me grounded and making sure that I'm exercising all parts of the brain and helping to validate me when I need validation. Like there's a whole group of like 2,000 sweet women that have a whole side group off to the side called Engineering Working Moms, like trading information and conversations and what did you do for your kid and this kid and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's what helps keep me grounded and moving forward. But being president of a random 501c3 with 50,000 members has a few, we're going back and forth and making it work for this year. But one of the things my husband said of like, that's one of the things he didn't push back on. He's like, sweet, it's been part of your life for the past 20 years. Our daughter is old enough. Of course you should put back in for president. Last time I got slated for a different board of directors position. And of course, you should put back in for president so that way Charlotte sees you doing this. I was like, oh, okay, well, let's do this then. I know I have the support to do this. And so actually, Charlotte and my husband were able to come out for the conference that you mentioned at the beginning of that. And so that was their first week conference. And Charlotte now thinks that she can storm any stage that Plum is on.
For her own personal gain or just for
Entertainment and giggles.
yeah, well, she's cute as could be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she can get away with a lot of stuff on today. 25 plus years ago when you were at RIT, I'm like, this is where you would be. And you are changing that needle and pushing forward onto a much larger path for that next generation. What do you tell those aspiring leaders, right? That are
I think RIT Karen. So I got this. So I was an officer in the RIT suite section. I was always treasurer. I liked counting money. I don't know. And So the two co-presidents and the secretary, while I was there being treasurer, were also there at Sweet Conference this year. So we have a picture now from us 20 years ago and a picture of us in 2024 at Sweet Conference, like recreating like the little same lineup that we did.
Yeah.
And so like I'm having a conversation with these women of like, of course, we didn't think you'd be doing this, Karen. You refused to be in pictures most of the time. Like, you just wanted to go into the corner and engineer things and count money and peacefully be the person behind the scenes. But that's not what life has led. But like, it's just hilarious that I'm the one that ended up being president of the organization. They used to have to like literally drag me into pictures at our IT of like, no, we would like a picture of you. You are one of our officers as part of this organization. You're going to get yourself up here and take this picture with us. And so it's very hilarious dichotomy. But I think that that's like the perfect evidence of like, it's amazing looking back and saying that those women are still there.
Yeah.
Like they are still part of my life. They're literally all over the country. One of them's in Indiana, one of them's in Virginia, one of them's in Oregon now. And they're still part of my life. Being able to be that guiding force of light for me and how I think and what I do.
So we could be mentors as well, right? So it's a weird thing. You talk a lot about community and being part of it. Can you share any initiatives or projects that you're working on right now that are community driven outside of what you've done already here within AFRL?
So one of the big things that I'm thinking about, you know, with my AFWERX hat on is how do we as AFWERX really engage with all of the PS? So there's 30 PS in the Department of the Air Force. In this partnership intermediary, that agreement is, you know, nonprofit. The idea is to help tech scout, do tech transfer, making sure all the IP that the Air Force does is in good hands, doing great things. Well, with my AFRIX hat on, I'm interested in all those companies that you've helped to develop as part of your T3 mission to help find them other opportunities in the Air Force. So I've been working a lot with the Department of the Air Force T3 lead, Scott Agenbaugh, to figure out how do we really engage that level of community um, from an Air Force perspective and start working with all of the PIAs in kind of that community manner and making sure that, you know, we're getting the PIAs what they need to be effective and have the right tools on how to engage with AFWERX, not only with our cyber sitter portfolio, but, you know, we've got 120 Spark cells globally. We've got a lot of other Air Force programming like Project ARC. We're putting airmen and guardians where problems need to be solved at any Air Force location. We've got our prime programs that focus on large, impactful. We know industry has solutions to this. We just have to figure out what industry solutions we can actually deploy. And so that's things like, all right, these 5 companies have invented drones. Which one of them can actually meet Air Force airworthiness qualifications that we can actually use in mission space? And so doing all that evaluation of what already exists out there as is and what can we actually buy off the shelf. And so that's what a lot of our prime programs are about. Trying to work more deeply with Defense Innovation Unit, venture capitalists, making sure we're sending good demand signals of things we're actually going to buy. And so that's where that we can have a much deeper relationship with all these partnership intermediaries, because we're 400 people, but we're only 400 people. We cannot touch every single cool innovation that this country is putting out right now. So we have to rely on partners like partnership intermediaries to help ingest all of that data and find the best of the best of what's going to get us to where we need to go tomorrow.
What's the best way people were to get a hold of you? If they wanted to work with AFWERX, if they wanted to go ahead and send in their industry solutions that are going to better the Air Force, what's the best way? Is it through the PIA? Is it directly through you?
So, you know, I do reference folks to their partnership intermediaries a lot because you guys are the ones working on the ground that understand the ecosystem and opportunities the best. But I mean, AFWERX.com actually does have a lot on it. It talks about all of our open solicitations when they're coming. We're revamping our Ask Me Anything webinars right now where anyone can log on and ask us questions. And we're actually working on, which we should be able to release here pretty soon, cohort curriculum for anyone accepted into the SIPR program to teach them about the government, working with the government, where are your opportunities, how do you start looking for customers, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be an opportunity coming in the next in the 2025 cohorts, that they're actually going to be giving cohort experiences along with that. So they'll automatically be accepted into that if they've got a SIPR proposal that was accepted.
Awesome. So great. Personal growth question.
Yeah.
Reflecting back, do you have a personal quality or skill that you have found to be crucial in your own personal growth?
Really good questions. I think one of my superpowers is, and this is because I love data and analysis and inputs and bringing all this in, is the capability to work to understand what other people's value propositions are. So that way I can make sure that, my goals align to where their values and opportunities are. And so what I mean by that is, like when we were working on Innovating, one of the things I went down to was I went and briefed the county legislators, and my goal was to convey what it is that we were working toward as the future goals of the information directorate, so they understood that, so that way they would understand the impact of their investment, and where that they wanted to go with Innovating. Like I couldn't make any promises of contracts or anything like that, but what I could do was convey what it was we were doing and how it was going to meet the goals of the Mohawk Valley as well, and what the impacts they were going to see as part of that. And when I was leaving that meeting, one of the legislators wondered up, and he said, "It's the first time that I understood what one of you people were saying." But I always go back to that conversation because, like, a lot of times when you're so deep technically, you're excited about the technical things you're working on and what the impact is, and it's easy to talk about it in the way that you're most comfortable with and understand. But when you're talking to someone else that has a different background and has different value proposition and different kind of profitability kind of things, like the county legislators want to see what the impact to the Mohawk Valley is going to be, with this Inavari concept we were building. Well, like I had to state it in our portfolio. I had to be able to communicate it to them with what the impact of the Mohawk Valley would be. So I had to completely redo the briefing I was doing and tell a whole different story in a whole different way than I would be if I was briefing internally over there. And so that way that they would resonate and understand that. I could have very easily done the same exact briefing in the same exact way that I do for a technical community, but it was going to be completely meaningless to them. That's not what they cared about. They cared about the economic impact of this area and how we could affect that with what we were doing.
That. Do you think having that like emotional involvement or an emotional IQ is a quality that a good leader should have in order to be successful in their career?
I mean, I think it helps any engineer. I always tell people that you could be the most brilliant engineer individually in the world. It doesn't matter if you can't communicate with other people. You're not going to get grant funding. You're not going to get funding from your company. You're not going to be able to build a team in order to have a bigger impact. Like you have to be able to communicate and make sure that and bring people to the table with you to be the best engineer that you actually can be. Um, and so being able to build that up over time, and I mean, that's certainly something that I had to work on deeply, certainly. As we talked about, I didn't even want to be in pictures when I was in college. But, it's something that you should try to work that muscle with as much as you possibly can. Because it's a need over and over and over and over again, no matter how much you might want to focus on your code or your piece of equipment or whatever that is, like you have to be able to build teams to have the impact you're looking for.
Okay. All right. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Purpose Grounds as we sat and dived deep in with Deputy Director of AFWERX, Miss Karen Roth. Thank you very much. Thank you to Utica Coffee Roasting Company, our sponsor. Do you have a favorite brand or blend of UCR, Karen?
I love cannoli. I love peanut butter cup. I love the pumpkin blend. I think you're noticing a theme.
Yeah. This morning I popped in Half Moon. Have you tried that?
Half Moon's always a good choice. A little sweet. I usually don't go for the super, super sweet ones, or
Yeah.
I cut it with something else.
I cut it with their Adirondack blend.
I like their dark Adirondack. My husband is Adirondack all the way. That's all he ever drinks. It's Adirondack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good man, though.
Right?
So they are sponsoring us and making sure that we are staying caffeinated and completely up to our quirkiness with their Adirondack blend today. So thank you to UCR. You can find more on their products at uticacoffeeroasting.com. And also thank you to AMP Master Images, a proud provider of our promotional items and branded gear. Visit masteryourimage.com. As always, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and we'll see you on the next episode of Purchase Grounds. Thank you.
Every day, we put into practice the belief that our community can be revitalized through responsible business development by giving back through innovation, standing out in the industry with new products, methods, and services. Most importantly, to roast and share our phenomenal coffee in that process.